Hi, everybody. I am Grace Lorden. I am the host of the podcast Workforce. And one of my favorite episodes is Why Are They Paid So Much, which we really set out to explain why people who are quite mediocre are paid a lot. And the person who really had probably one of the best insights to this was a gentleman called Marc Keuschnigg, who is an academic who has studied the link between being brainy and also income. And in fact, what he has found and what he tries to convince me of in this snippet of conversation is that you don't need brains to be in the top 1% of earners. Yep, you heard it. You don't need brains to be in the top 1% of earners. Let's hear what he has to say.
The first question. So your research tells us the highest earning 1% of the population and the brainiest 1% of the population have very little overlap. How did you come up with this conclusion?
So we have in Sweden access to great data, register data, which is very different to survey data because it spans the whole population. And when you study wage-related things with survey data, you typically miss out on the most wealthy, right? They have low coverage in surveys, but our data spans the whole income spectrum. So we have data on all wage earners from Sweden, plus we have data from military conscription, which measures the cognitive ability of 18, 19-year-old men, right? So we can relate that cognitive ability data to later life outcomes, which in our case is wages earned in the labor market. And hence, with this data, we can do stuff, as you just said, we can check how brainy the 1% is. And as it turns out, they are quite brainy. Yeah, they are far more clever than the rest of the population. But among the top earners, we see huge differences in wage. And these differences we see there cannot be explained by differences in cognitive ability, meaning that cognitive ability is not predictive anymore in the top wage percentiles.
So what are the drivers of high pay among the 1%?
This we didn't study. So what we do is we just focus on the relationship between wage and cognitive ability. And in the traditional research around, I mean, there are many studies looking at this connect, right? And they are traditionally informed by human capital theory. So they ask how predictive IQ, some measure of IQ is for earnings, right? How does IQ relate to the income people make? And they typically find a very strong association between the two factors. But we we swap the axes and we ask how smart are the top earners? So we can zoom in on the top income percentiles and ask very different questions, not related to human capital, but related to questions of meritocracy, right? Are we indeed filling the top positions in our societies with those people that are most able? And this is an important question, not only because these people earn humongous wages, but also because their decisions are consequential for a lot of people.
Can you talk a little bit about braininess, Marc? So how is it defined within your data?
So we use a measure that is very close to a measure used in the US Army called the Armed Forces Qualification Test, which is not a standard IQ test, but tests cognitive abilities in different dimensions, such as spatial ability, verbalizing skills, logic, and these sorts of different aspects of cognitive ability. And in the literature, this is supposed to be the better measure of cognitive ability than standard IQ tests. But I am not a cognitive scientist or a psychologist. I'm not an expert on measuring intelligence. I'm aware of all the drawbacks that are out there, and we just use the one measure that we have. We are also blind on non-cognitive abilities, right? So if we now say, the top 10% in Sweden, they are not extremely good in cognitive ability, we do miss out on other sources of ability. Just think of non-cognitive abilities such as being good with people, being resilient to stress. These sorts of abilities we don't look at.
It's interesting. So I did some work some time ago that looked at the rewards to non-cognitive skills, and they really only kick in at the top of the distribution in the UK when they're interacted with cognitive skills. So you might imagine somebody getting to the top of their career and needing those soft skills to be more productive, or maybe convince people that they deserve a promotion.
This makes a lot of sense, and we also write about this fact in our paper. But our paper received a lot of media attention in February, March this year. And typically, we know how journalists work, right? They need good headlines. So this nuance, right, has been lost in the way our paper has been received.
So Marc, from when you've been thinking about your results, do you believe that the missing link might be soft skills? Or do you feel that maybe that individuals who are the brainiest in our society, as given by your data, just aren't extrinsically motivated? Or do you maybe have a hunch that something different is going on?
So I believe non-cognitive abilities do play in. Of course, it would be naive to assume otherwise, but of course, we also have a very serious interpretation of our results, and that is if you observe a lot of plateauing, right? A range in your income distribution that is not positively linked to cognitive ability anymore, you do also observe, these are traces of social exclusion. Could be interpreted as social exclusion, meaning that it takes luck to arrive at society's top position. It takes family connections to arrive there, and all sorts of benefits that you have from a prestigious upbringing, right? So if we look at the same data and slice it in two ways, so we only look at those who come from a low socio-economic status family and those who come from a top SES family, then we see the plateauing only for those who come from the prestigious families. So for those who come from families with lower socioeconomic status, we don't see the plateauing, meaning that even in the top income range, income is very strongly connected to cognitive ability. Or in other words, people who come from underprivileged families and do make it to top positions, they have to be really smart.
Okay, that makes sense. And do you have anything on lost Einsteins in your data, Marc? I didn't see this specifically in the paper, looking at people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds who are incredibly intelligent, who don't make it into the top earning jobs.
Yeah, when you use the Swedish register data, you're not allowed to zoom in on single people because it's supposed to be all anonymous. So we did not look for the lost Einsteins. And we just sliced our data by income percentile. So we look at bits of data that contain like 500-600 people, and we don't zoom in at closer.
So can you say anything about people who are in some of the lower socioeconomic groups, and whether or not, when they have high levels of intelligence, if they're always making it into the top of the distribution?
No, that's not what I mean. Is that if you make it to the top of the distribution and you come from a low SES family, you need top IQ.
So this I got, but I'm wondering about the proportion of people who have very high IQ who don't make it to the top. Do you have any information on that?
We didn't look into that, but I mean, there are many possibilities with that data.
That's super interesting.